How's it going, everyone? Thank you for joining me in yet another fishing video. In this episode, we will be looking at some springtime fishing at Lonetree. Uh, this was kind of pre-fishing for a tournament I had, and the tournament didn't turn out so well. However, the pre-fishing, of course, was great, and I actually felt very confident going into the tournament. Uh, that I was pre-fishing for, but unfortunately, it really didn't pan out at all. So yeah, let's just jump right into the day. So pretty much, we started off today trying to figure something out for the tournament I had coming up. This is probably the first time I fished one of the local tournaments in a while, and spoiler alert, did not go as planned, but we were just trying to find kind of some areas where I knew that people wouldn't really be hitting up too much, like this riprap. I don't see a ton of people focusing a lot on this riprap. So I, after kind of fishing some other areas, this was kind of the next stop just to see if anything was there. After that, didn't really catch anything in any of my other spots, so we decided to just start flipping and just see if we could just try to find some areas where there might be a high concentration of fish, possibly. This was kind of our first bite after a little while too, so kind of was nice to catch something after going biteless for about an hour. But this is kind of when it started picking up, though. Like you saw, my buddy Stu flipped over to a different rod, started flipping, and this was his first flip. Like you saw, he put down his buzzbait and caught this decent little guy. For the most part, we did not catch any monsters. We just caught a lot of fish that were probably between 14 to 16 inches, which that's not too bad for a card tournament out there. Obviously, you want to try to have some kind of kicker, but it is what it is, though. But in this bay, in this little bay, for those of you that know Lonetree, you'll know exactly where this is, but there's a little bay, and every once in a while, I do really well back here, which this ended up being one of those times. It's just, I feel like the bite changes so much that, it's pre-fishing for that lake is kind of almost detrimental to the tournament that you're fishing, just because the bite just changed so much. I know in one of my past videos, that's probably a few years old now, I even mentioned the bite changes so much from one day to another. There's days where I'll have a buzzbait bite or a frog bite, and then I'll go literally a day or two after, and I'm catching them flipping, and I can't get anything on topwater. And conditions could totally be the same. And when I say conditions, I'm mainly talking about weather and all that, time of day, blah 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 blah. But yeah, I mean, we found, like you're seeing, we're staying in this bay, and we caught a lot of fish in this bay. A lot of good, decent fish, just flipping, throwing some jigs and Senkos, and we didn't really try any creature baits or anything, like Texas rig any, which I probably should have, just to kind of make sure I covered all of my bases. But it is what it is. Hindsight's 20/20. But yeah, overall, I mean, just another fun day out on the water. Just catching bass, just doing what I like to do, which is flip. I love throwing a jig. That's honestly now my favorite lure to catch bass on, and it's topwater fishing, don't get me wrong, is extremely fun, but I will always go with a jig bite 100% of the time as my favorite style of fishing. Alright, so kind of to talk about baits, like I mentioned, we were mainly just throwing Senkos and jigs. This is a watermelon red, same deal as before, just a weightless 5-inch Senko. You probably could have thrown a 6-inch, maybe to kind of get a bigger bite, possibly. But I don't think, especially out there, I don't really think Senko size is a huge factor. Well, at least that day, probably not. But some days, yeah, they can be, especially on the lake. It always depending on the lake that you fish. There's some lakes that I know that you got to throw a 4-inch, or you got to throw a 5-inch, or you got to even throw a 3-inch Senko. But Lonetree especially, like I've never really had one of those days where it's like they're really too finicky that they want to eat a 5. I mean, there's days where I've thrown 4s out there, and yeah, I've caught fish, but it's like, do I think they would have bitten a 5-inch? Who knows? But the other bait I was throwing was a Senko, probably, or not a Senko. Wow. This is not a Senko. This is a jig, everyone. I had a brain fart, everyone. Jig. Throwing it on, I know I've shown this rod before on a past video, but throwing it on my jig rod, this is probably another, this is more of the color I was throwing, kind of a green pumpkin kind of color, but, just kind of similar deal with, but just with a trailer, like this is probably a watermelon red trailer. The thing is, with jigs, you just gotta make sure if the water's clear, like it was there, try to throw something more natural. If it's darker, throw something that stands out, like black and blue or something. Some other things I could have done that day is, like I mentioned, like a creature bait. Like mainly, I'm talking more like beavers or Strike King's versions of rodent, or like D-bomb from missile baits. Like there's a lot of different beavers out there, so, and those kind of creature baits. So those work great. That's one thing I could have done differently. Another one, which I did years ago in one of my junior tournaments out there, was throw a drop shot. And the thing is with the drop shot is, obviously, you usually try to throw it on lighter line. You could get away with throwing it on 12-pound tests, in my opinion. I've done that out when I had a college tournament out in California, and honestly, that worked out very well. So I always see flipping as something that, don't be afraid to try new things, because those bass, if they start getting conditioned to a certain bait, it's a great time to try something different. Like I said, just throwing a drop shot could work pretty well. It's just, is it ideal pitching that thing in brush? Probably not. It gets hung up a little easier. But at the same time, do you see a lot of people doing it, like where you're fishing? I know around here I don't see as many people doing it. I've seen a few, but yeah, I mean, it's always just reflect on these days, like what you could do different. And I do, and the nice thing is, especially with looking back at some of these days, I'm like, wow, why? There's some that are very obvious, like, wow, why did I not do that or try that? Then there's some where it's like this day is a good example. Like, this is just kind of nitpicky. Like, oh, well, I could have flipped this or that. In all honesty, I don't really think it really mattered too much what you were flipping. Because, I mean, we caught them, we mainly caught them on the jig, but that's because I didn't really put anything else on. So, I mean, I think, we could have caught some more on the Senko, or caught some more throwing a drop shot even, or I know we tried throwing a frog a little bit, but even then, like, we could have tried sticking with top water a little more once it got a little more towards dusk, which we didn't really try that hard because we just kind of wanted to go home. And I want to say the mosquitoes were kind of tearing us up once it got dark out, so we were just ready to go at that point. So yeah, hopefully you took something away from that little rambling spiel I had. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and yeah, if you could just leave a like, comment, subscribe, that whole big three for YouTube, that would be great. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.